You've probably heard of the Ice Age. But do you know what our planet was really like back then? Maybe you picture Earth as a bleak, snow-blanketed world, a lifeless white ball. Yet 200,000 years ago, at the height of the Pleistocene, Earth wasn't a frozen block. It was a restless, living world. Yes, there was plenty of ice at the poles and on the mountaintops, but at the foot of that cold lay a tremendous prairie, thick with grasses that fed vast herds. On a grand scale, it was a planet we'd recognize, with the continents roughly where you'd expect them. Seen from high above, the Earth of that time would have looked startlingly familiar. Africa kept its triangular shape. Eurasia stretched like an immense tapestry. The Americas, straddling the equator, traced S-shaped shorelines. The oceans followed the climate's lead, and their shifts showed along the coasts. Sometimes the sea drew back, sometimes it advanced. Even so, from space, almost everything would have seemed normal. But in this documentary, we won't watch Earth from space. We'll walk it from the inside. We'll meet the animals that roamed prairies where today there are roads and buildings. We'll approach our many ancestors, and from ground level, we'll look up at icy mountains, valleys, and forests that shrank or advanced with each pulse of dry air. Above all, we'll answer the question that brought you here. What was the Earth like 200,000 years ago? Across the northern world spread the Mammoth Steppe, a place our modern eyes might mistake for near desert, yet in truth a machine for turning sunlight into grass. The secret wasn't only climate, it was the cast of residents. Grass thrived under cold winds and nutrient-rich soils, and the gardeners were the millions of mouths of woolly mammoths, hulking bison, horses, and woolly rhinoceroses with curved horns, all of them cold-adapted. There were so many animals that today's herds would look small beside them. They walked, grazed, trampled, broke open soil, and scattered seeds. Hungry shadows followed them. Cave lions bigger than those of today, huge noisy hyenas, wolves learning to coordinate and hunt in packs, and saber-toothed cats quick as lightning. It was a taut, humming web where nothing went to waste, an ecosystem both rich and restless. Yet this steppe wasn't constant. It could change within just a few decades. A generous summer could be followed by a cruel one. A valley that offered grass to the horizon might turn to frozen ground the next. That demanded movement. Herds of grazers began to migrate, predators followed, and the scavengers trailed them all. We, humans, moved within those currents too. We had no granaries or barns, no printed calendars, certainly no maps. But we had memory, sharp eyes, ingenious hands, the warmth of fire, and the power to work together. Each human generation learned the best routes, how to read the sky where water hid and when plants were in season. Retold by firelight again and again, those lessons became our species' first encyclopedia. And all those changes we had to adapt to so quickly had a reason. To understand why the planet behaved like this, you need a clock that ticks not in hours but in millennia. Earth's orbit isn't fixed. It shifts subtly, and with every shift, the amount of heat reaching different latitudes and seasons changes. Eccentricity makes the orbit more or less oval. Obliquity tilts Earth's axis a little more or a little less. Precession makes that axis wobble like a spinning top. Together, these cycles tune the climate's beat. They don't explain everything, but they score the alternating movements of cold and mild. 200,000 years ago, those cycles had placed the planet in an interglacial lull, and not far ahead, the clock would swing back toward cold. As climate breathed in and out, the sea level rose and fell with it. In the great drops, the ocean retreated by more than 100 meters, exposing land that is sea floor today. Land bridges appeared, Beringia between Siberia and Alaska, and broad plains where the North Sea lies now. When temperatures climbed again, those plains drowned. For animals, doors opened and closed. New grazing routes, fresh hunting corridors, new water barriers where fields had been. For humans, the world's map kept changing and we had to learn it all over again. Now let's go to Africa. The African savanna was a strict school. Big herbivores shaped the landscape as mammoths did in the north. Elephants opened paths and pushed over young trees. Buffalo and antelope clipped the grasses. Hippos carved muddy routes between water and shore. Each season brought its own hazards. Rains renewed the land, but also collapsed riverbanks and drew predators. Drought packed life tightly around waterholes that became stages for tense interspecies standoffs. Along the edges of savannas and forests lived small bands of our ancestors, Homo sapiens. Some of their faces would be recognizable to us. Today, beneath layers of ancient ash and sediment in the east and north of the continent, lie skulls and tools that push our timeline farther back than we imagined. Our kind was few, but their ingenuity made up for their numbers. They used a technique called l'évaloir to craft tools, carefully preparing a stone core so they could strike off flakes that were almost identical, sharp and versatile. From those hands came knives, scrapers, and points. They also used ochre as a binder, smearing caves and shelters with red, perhaps as decoration as well. And their greatest tool was fire. Fire softened roots, made inedible foods edible, drove off insects and big cats, and lengthened the day so people could gather. Human groups at this stage were nimble in their ways. One day they dug bulbs and gathered fruits. The next, they followed a migration. Then they mixed hunting with shellfish collecting. Alliances and family ties formed a safety net. Those who succeeded shared. Those who failed weren't abandoned. Now let's cross the Mediterranean into Europe and Western Asia, where another humanity had the floor. If you live in Europe, chances are you carry Neanderthal ancestry. And no, that's not a myth. Here's why. Neanderthals were robust, with dense bones, compact bodies, and broad chests. The cold never stopped them. They learned that wood blocks the wind, leather clothing beats the air, and fire dries and warms. Their daily life was hard. Forests shrank, grasslands spread, winters ran long. They also had to contend with cave lions and with hyenas that cleaned up what others left. Overhead, the sky was a clear, cutting cold that made hands ache, and still, they thrived. When we finally learned to read genomes, we discovered Neanderthals weren't far from us at all. Between them and us, there were meetings, exchanges of ideas, and children. In many people living outside Africa today, small segments of Neanderthal DNA remain, a reminder that humanity has never been a straight line. Our genetic trail also shows we didn't mix only with Neanderthals. Farther east looms the faint shadow of another humanity, the Denisovans. We found a few of their bones, just fragments. Yet in some people of Asia, especially those in high regions, lives a genetic variant inherited from them that fine-tunes our response to thin air. It's an invisible detail that says a lot, quietly at work, whenever someone breathes easily at altitude. Mixing between human branches wasn't a rare accident. It was part of history's fabric. Now let's visit a world without humans. 200,000 years ago, Australia was a peculiar continent. Giant marsupials ruled there, like creatures from a fantasy tale. Diprotodon, huge and peaceable, weighed more than 2 tons and moved in groups that stripped shrubs and shaped the land as elephants do in Africa. Nearby, the short-faced kangaroo, Procoptodon, walked upright and inquisitive, with forward-facing eyes and strong hands for tearing leaves. In the dark margins of the forest lurked Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, not enormous but armed with clamp-like jaws and retractable claws ready to strike where it hurt most. Across Australia's warmer zones wandered a colossal monitor lizard we call Megalania, as long as a car and with venomous saliva. In this region, rivers and wetlands weren't safe havens. There stalked Quincana, a running crocodile that could chase prey on land. This entire fauna had evolved in isolation from the rest of the world and from humans. Now, switch hemispheres. In South America, the Great American Biotic Interchange produced a fauna that feels like a dream. The heavyweight was Megatherium, a ground sloth that rose like a wall, pushed over trunks, opened pathways through the forest, and ripped open termite mounds as if unfastening a door. Its slow step was deceptive. Its strength could move astonishing weight. Alongside it trundled caravans of glyptodonts, arched beneath bony domes with armored, mace-like tails. The ground creaked under their feet, and their tracks became roads others followed. Between them wandered true oddities like Macrauchenia, llama-bodied with a small trunk, and Toxodon, barrel-bellied and stout, which would later puzzle Charles Darwin himself. Over them all, a shadow brought fear: Smilodon populator, the largest saber-tooth. Its forelimbs were pillars, its canines knives poised for the precise strike. The South American landscape was a long conversation between plains and jungle, rivers that burst their banks and returned, seasons that redrew the map. As everywhere, life adapted as it could. Some giants held out, others had only thousands of years left. The solitude of islands. On Madagascar lived birds that defy our imagination. Elephant birds, so tall they'd look down at you, so heavy their steps alone would open clearings. They laid eggs bigger than a soccer ball. Far off in New Zealand, moas, giant flightless birds, were the forest's gardeners. Where they nipped, the woods took a different shape. Over them circled a singular predator, Haast's eagle, gigantic, with talons like daggers. Across Indian Ocean archipelagos, enormous tortoises, heavy as stones, opened paths by sheer patience. They ate, digested, and seeded the forest. 200,000 years ago, almost none of these islands had known a human footprint. They were fragile Edens, because the same isolation that spawned such marvels left them defenseless against abrupt change. And remember, what we call the Ice Age wasn't constant cold. 200,000 years ago, we were in a mild stretch, what scientists call an interglacial pause. In geological terms, we were living on the margin of a chapter about to close, and the next chapter would be colder. In times like these, seas retreat, air dries, and dust rides the sky. The mammoth steppe, fueled by cold winds and well-drained soils, pushed southward. When the climate eased, that prairie fell back, and shrubs and forests reclaimed some ground. No map was final. We humans learned to read those signals. We learned where to cross a valley before a glacier sealed it, where water would linger when the wind shifted, when it was worth trailing a herd, and when to wait by a narrow pass to ambush it. The question that hangs in the air when we put all this together is simple and deep. Why are we the only ones left? Of all the human kinds that shared the Pleistocene, why did only Homo sapiens reach the present? There isn't a single answer. It was a bundle of small advantages that, compounded over thousands of years, tipped the scales our way. Our cultural flexibility allows small groups to adjust their techniques to wildly different shifting environments. Cooperation meant bands could split up and reunite, swap allies, absorb newcomers, or fold in distant kin. Cumulative innovation turned good ideas into better ones. A napping trick today, a way to carry fire tomorrow, a safer hunting method the day after. Mobility and landscape learning became rules of life, mental maps, shared through words and example. Let us remember mountain passes and water routes without ink. And mixing with other human lineages, far from a fluke, may have given us useful physiological tweaks, along with stories and know-how. None of this diminishes our cousins. Neanderthals weren't clumsy brutes. They were people adapted to harsh settings, with technology, fire, and care. Denisovans, known today mostly by their genetic shadow, were real people with children, strategies, and memories. The tiny Homo floresiensis, isolated on its island, shows how human ingenuity adapts even under minimal energy budgets. Erectus and heidelbergensis carried whole lineages for dizzying spans of time. The human tree had many branches, and at its forks there were exchanges, losses, and discoveries. We remain, but not without carrying their echoes inside us. Everyday life 200,000 years ago was made of small gestures that hid heroism. Big game hunting wasn't a daily epic. It was a risky bet, tried only when the payoff justified it. Some days were for shellfish on coasts where low tide left a modest buffet. Some for gathering roots with a taste of earth that saved you from hunger. Some for repairing tools and fixing shelters, and some for simple stillness. Fire drew everyone together, and around it, something appeared that still defines us: storytelling. Before writing, there were tales, explanations, warnings, myths that gave shape to fear and desire. A star that returned each year in the east could serve as a reminder. When it rises, follow the river north. When it sets, look for fruit on the slopes. The sky became a mental map of seasons, and memory the group's portable archive. Now let's take in a few quiet scenes from that world. In a cave in southern Europe, smoke stains the ceiling, and the floor is carpeted with stone flakes. Someone has honed a scraper to perfection. Outside, on old snow, the tracks of bison and horses cross like drawn lines. A few kilometers away, a hyena returns to its den with a herbivore's skull. Beside it, a young Neanderthal scans the valley, chewing a cleaned strip of tendon. Somewhere in East Africa, a teenage girl learns to prepare a Levallois core under a relative's watchful eye. The blows are precise, and the result is a flake nearly identical to one made years before. Ochre on a stone leaves a red smear on her fingers. There's no rush. Skill is best passed on without hurry. Meanwhile, on the South American pampas, a glyptodont emerges at dawn. Its curved back a dome, its tail a club. In the distance, a smilodon stretches like a house cat, then slips away through tall grass without a sound. In Australia, a procoptodon stands motionless, then bounds and vanishes behind the eucalypts. A few kilometers off, a thylacoleo climbs with sharp claws and sprawls along a branch, waiting, dozing, trusting its knack for dropping exactly where it must. There was danger in all these scenes, yes, but also abundance if you knew where to look. Learning where to look was humanity's great craft. 200,000 years ago, seasons made and unmade the land. Animals came and went. Rivers ran brown with mud and later ran clear. The sea advanced or withdrew depending on the years. No one owned the landscape. It was shared with other bands, with other humans who spoke differently, but understood the same universal gesture of peace. The balance was fragile, and yet it endured. Take too much from a place and it gives back less. Forget to move in time and storms found you without shelter. Learning was costly, and each generation paid a part so the next could afford the luxury of being a little wiser. As humans grew wiser, imagination grew with us. From a sum of small practices, something appeared that would one day loom large: the symbol. A pendant made from a pierced shell, a stone stained with pigment, a pattern of cuts that answers not only to need, but to taste. The great animal paintings of Europe were still many millennia away, but the materials were already at hand, and so were curiosity and experiment. Imagination, the thing that saves us and sometimes gets us into trouble, kept finding cracks to slip through. If we admire today the silhouette of a bison on a limestone wall, it's because earlier, hands had learned to mix fat and earth to say something more than a survival recipe. And 200,000 years may seem like an uncrossable distance, but that world speaks loudly to us. The past speaks through fossils that hold clues to ways of life. It speaks through our DNA, where fragments of other humans rest. It speaks through our own tastes and fears, which still find comfort in firelight, still feel a strange joy walking an open prairie, still calm at the murmur of a river. Museums around the world, if we look at them quietly, are time machines that return us to that stage. Standing before a mammoth tusk or a sturdy skull, we find ourselves part of a long chain that began long before any city. The Pleistocene was neither paradise nor hell. It was a demanding world that taught us the craft of adapting. There, we learned that no one defeats climate. You bargain with it, learn its language, and respect its shifts. We learned to share tasks and food because that was the best insurance policy. To move when it was time and wait when it paid to. To read the promise in a cloud and the threat in a sky that was too clear. In that world, we forged a tool worth more than any stone point. The capacity to imagine possible futures and prepare today the means to reach them. That very tool, raised to a higher power, is what would let us, millennia later, plant, build, sail, and write. Come back one last time to the ice's very edge. Before us, a plain ripples with life. There are herds and a small human group watching from a distance. Someone tells a short story about the exact bend in the river that forces bison to pass slowly. Someone scrapes a hide with a tool that fits their hand like a glove. Someone else, maybe a child, looks up and asks why some lights return and others don't. No one can answer, as we would today, with numbers and names. But someone says, with the kind of wisdom that fits inside a sentence, when that star rises over there, it's time to move south. That's the sort of knowledge that lets you live. And that was the sort of answer that kept our species alive while we shared the planet with others. Now, let's come back. We've wandered through a world that would have been different without us. And we would be different without it. When we flip through our own story, the Ice Age holds a strange place. We often reduce it to a frozen postcard or an adventure film. But it was so much more. It was a patient school for living, for cooperation, for imagination. The giants that filled it may be gone, but their legacy remains. In today's elephants, something of the mammoths endures. In the great birds of now, echo the distant calls of birds we will never meet alive. In our genes, faint signatures from cousins who are no longer here can still be read. And above all, in the way we look at the world, make plans, tell stories, and cherish company, we carry the mark of those who survived that time of risk and reward. Thank you for coming this far, and for making this journey possible with your listening and curiosity. If you're excited to keep exploring Earth's past with a clear eye and a sense of wonder, stay close. At every step, we find new questions, surprising discoveries, and now and then, the powerful feeling that we understand a little better where we come from. And that, perhaps, is the best compass for choosing where we want to go.